Good afternoon to all. Thank you so much for joining us. We will get started shortly as people join the webinar. We'll just give a couple minutes. Thank you. Okay, well, we're at 2:31 and we want to be able to have enough time to make it through our presentation and all of our questions today. So I'll go ahead and get started. Again, welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the California Jobs First Business Ready Sites Program webinar, Safe and Ready to Build. We're talking about site safety, grading, and physical readiness. We appreciate all of those who have been following along with our webinar series, How to Get a Site Ready. And if you're here for the first time, we welcome you today. My name is Jolia Jackson. I'm the Regional Engagement and Development Manager with the Regional Economic Development Initiatives team here at GO-Biz. This is our fifth session of the series, which we have put together to help communities, developers, and local governments prepare sites for business investment by understanding key infrastructure requirements. So today's focus is site safety, how to evaluate and communicate a site's physical preparedness, including safety considerations, grading requirements, and foundational elements that reduce risk and accelerate project timelines. So we'll explore what is often looked at to determine if a site is truly ready to build and how communities can proactively address common barriers. So we're excited to dive into this topic, provide you with practical tools and insights to move your projects forward. Next slide, please. So for our agenda, I'm just going to give a brief overview of our program for those who are joining for the first time. We will have our presentation, go into Q&A, and then we'll share our support and resources that we have available. Thanks, Taylor, who is driving our deck behind the scenes. So our overview, the Business Ready Sites program, it launched about 8 months ago. It's a key initiative of the California Jobs First strategy led by both our Ready and GO-Biz teams. It's a tool that has been designed to proactively identify and elevate business ready parcels across all 13 of California's economic regions. So when we say business ready, we mean they are either move-in ready or shovel ready. This tool allows our business investment services team to respond quickly to business leads and present a curated high-quality portfolio to site selectors, investors, and companies looking to grow and scale in California. It's the first stop, and we want our top sites to be highlighted. And so when we're looking at who can submit sites, local governments, they play a central role in site submission because they have jurisdiction over land use, zoning, permitting, long-term planning. So this includes our cities, counties, joint power authorities, and utility or community service districts that oversee the proposed parcels. So they're best positioned to confirm site readiness, provide accurate information, and ensure alignment with local development priorities. Our economic development organizations are also eligible because they are directly engaged in promoting business growth, investment, and job creation. And this includes business improvement districts and other EDOs that work closely with industry, property owners, and local governments to advance economic opportunities. So together, these partners, they help us identify high quality competitive sites that can attract investment and that support job creation and advance the goals of California Jobs First. Next slide, please. Okay, so what makes a site business ready? We're focused on sites that are prime candidates for headquarters, research and development facilities, and advanced manufacturing projects that specifically drive industry development and job creation. We want them to be fully zoned and entitled, infrastructure readiness and zoning, environmental compliance and permits. So having all of those taken care of. Next slide. So when submitting sites, organizations should include any completed CEQA environmental reviews, especially if they evaluated potential uses tied to one of the pilot sectors, provide local zoning information that confirms the site is already approved for headquarters, research and development, or industrial manufacturing, include proof of existing utility access, and highlight whether the site can support advanced or energy intensive infrastructure, which is often essential for modern manufacturing and technology operations. And then if there are any site disclosures that are available, we ask that you provide those too. Next slide. So for our account registration, very simple to request an account. You will simply fill out the fields. It's maybe 10 fields that just request your contact information, company, and once you submit that request, we will review to ensure that you are an eligible entity and then go ahead and provide access. Now, I just want to note that once you submit, it will tell you that you already have access, but unfortunately, there's a little something behind the scenes that we haven't been able to fix. And so once you submit your request, then we will go ahead and review it, and if you are an eligible entity, then we provide that access. And then we will send you up a follow-up email with some of our tools and resources that we have once we activate your account. Next slide. All right, so now we are at the most important point of our webinar today. We have our presentation, and our guest today is Jerry Kamilos, and he is with us, and he's going to tell you all about himself and about site safety and readiness. Thanks, Jerry.
Okay, well, thank you, Julie, and really a shout out to the whole GO-Biz team for putting on these webinars. I think they're really critical and they're helpful, and I'm really appreciative that your team reached out to me to do this, and it's an exciting topic, certainly a topic that I've been involved with for going on to 3 decades, and mostly in Northern California, and being involved in about 17,000 acres of projects, getting to that point where they're construction ready, business ready, and so today I'm going to talk about six areas. First, how to evaluate and communicate a site's physical readiness to prospects, safety and risk reduction standards that make a site competitive, securing a clarity on grading, earthwork, and site stabilization requirements, and also recognizing common barriers that slow down site development and how to address them proactively. And then we'll move on to how to address what developers and site selectors look for when determining if a site is construction ready. And finally, I think this is probably the biggest issue and an opportunity is strengthening the collaboration between economic development teams, planning departments, engineers, and public works to maximize the exposure of sites to their suitability for construction and development. So let's start off with the first portion of this, and this is how to assess whether a site is truly ready to build and how to clearly communicate the readiness to developers, site selectors, and state partners. Now, these subjects I'm going to cover probably are several days worth of information, but we're going to be condensing them into a summary fashion. So, pardon the briefity, but hopefully in the Q&A portion of this webinar, we can pick up some details that you may be interested in. So first of all, the key document of any site is the CEQA document. And this was covered in the prior webinar very extensively. But the documents, the final certified environmental impact report is critical because in that it has mitigation measures. These mitigation measures literally are the roadmap to deliver a project. And these have to be carefully studied and reviewed and articulated, on any site that's being pursued. In those mitigation measures, besides whether it's a county or city or lead environmental agency, you're going to have to also look at our other agencies involved. And we'll discuss that further in the presentation. And the other important aspect of this is whether or not that environmental document, that final EIR, was it a program EIR or a project-specific EIR? If it's a program EIR, it may require additional environmental review. And that needs to be understood. It needs to be clarified, and it needs to be visual in order for a potential user or buyer or employer to really understand what the process is entail to ultimately get to a building permit. The other is if it's a project-related EIR, at that point, it may only require a staff review and no further public reviews. But each city and county has their own requirements and whether or not to be ready for a building permit, whether or not that project still has to go to some type of planning commission or even a supervisor or a city council review. And that's up to each city. So it's important to understand what are the rules of your city, what's your rules of your county, or what's the role of your agency if it's not a city or county. Another aspect that really needs to be known is what are the costs and what are the steps to get from where we are today, where that project is today, that property, to the ultimate building permit. And ultimately, that's where the user wants to go. So it's critical to look at these, and we'll explore some of that later in the presentation as well. And of course, to understand some of the essential safety conditions and hazard mitigations, access control, emergency considerations that jurisdictions and developers expect before construction can begin is really important. So safety and risk reduction standards that make a site competitive is critical. For example, the first thing we go to is the environmental site assessment. This is an assessment of the history of the project as it pertains to anything that's hazardous or how the site historically has been treated, whether it's been farmed, whether it's been storage, whether it's had some special conditions that have to be evaluated and understood. What you're looking for, there's two parts of this. It's called a phase one, and once the the history and the site assessments done, then there's a determination environmental engineer is licensed to determine if there are no further actions. If there are no further actions, great, but in some instances there may be. Maybe there's arsenic as it relates to old orchards that used to be on the property. It might be an old fueling station that might have some staining. Um, and so the requirement in the phase one is to do what's called a phase two, which is allow additional exploration of the property, determine what if any there are issues, and the remedies to cure, and then come in and complete those in order to continue on the process. All that has to be called out to allow the user, employer, agency, whoever is going to be using that property to understand its condition. Um, and to understand that is really important. The other part is fire and safety, and the fire and safety plan on the property for construction purposes. Um, this is coordinated with the local fire department, and the fire department, fire marshal, and this um, has a lot of bearing on how the construction and constructability of the project can bear. And this deals predominantly with when combustible material is brought on site. So for the typical, improvements, underground improvements, all the way to roadway, it's not as critical. But as you get into areas beyond grading, and you're bringing materials beyond just cement, uh, and and iron, and you're bringing it on wood, plastics, combustible items, it becomes very critical, and that has to be worked out. And a plan has to be worked out with the local fire department, and also articulated as part of the property description. So the the next item is really how do you identify whether how things like site grading, drainage, compaction, erosion control um, measures meet industry expectations, and how these factors influence project timelines. So being able to secure clarity on grading, earthwork, site stabilization, and other requirements is really, again, critical to allow the user, employer, agency that desires to develop a property to understand um, what's the process of getting to a grading permit. Again, the key is mitigation measures in the environmental document, and understanding if there are some special mitigation measures. For example, um, species or habitat mitigation that has to be secured offsite, maybe through a habitat conservation plan um, program, maybe through a nature conservancy or land trust. Um, those elements need to be secured in order to allow the mitigation measures uh, to be accommodated, but also be able to allow that jurisdiction to lawfully issue a grading permit. There may be other items, such as posting bonds for some of the improvements that are necessary as part of the grading permit, such as drainage. Often is accompanied as part of a grading permit, and it could be on-site drainage improvements. Um, it could be on-site or off-site. So it's critical to understand that. And so the pathway, articulating the pathway to get to that grading permit is really important in order to have the credibility, and to be able to demonstrate the constructability of a site. Um, other considerations that need to be put in play here is floodplain. A project may be all or part within a certain category of FEMA flood map condition that you may have to either grade out, raise a certain portion of that property outside or above the floodplain, and that would require coordination with the local floodplain FEMA floodplain manager, and ultimately may require hydrology analysis that may be required in order to assure that the ultimate um, finish elevations are above the required floodplain. In the state of California, we have SB5, which is the 200-year floodplain requirement, but other cities and counties may have different requirements that go above and beyond just the state requirements. So you have to be very understanding of what the local requirements are in order to address the floodplain management situation. And then, of course, um, the local floodplain manager, in coordination with FEMA, to get a conditional letter of map revision if you have to modify the FEMA maps. That's critical, and being able to spell that out. And then once the grading is complete, those finished grading elevations are again processed through FEMA, so that ultimately a letter of map revision is issued that would allow that floodplain map to be altered. And that's in the Sacramento Valley and San Joaquin Valley, dealing with CLOMARs and LOMARs is very, very common. It's not something that is unusual. Soil conditions are critical. Are the soils expansive? Are they under certain types of stress? What's the makeup of the soil? Clay, sand, etc., chalk in some cases, and so being able to articulate, because that's going to dictate the design necessary of the foundation for whatever structures are going to be built on that property. Storm drainage monitoring program. What's the strategy to monitor storm drainage and handle storm drainage on the property? Especially when you have certain detention facilities that might be associated to them. So this ultimate storm drainage condition is going to be critical to understand and articulate. The compactability of the soil. Does the soil require supplements? Like lime is very common, and how do you source those lime? How do you transport the lime, and how do you place the lime on the within the project? And that is all critical to be able to identify the layout. Another part of the project site development that you need to consider are off-site infrastructure. Again, you need to go to the mitigation measures, and also there's also other agreements. If a project is further along, there may be a subdivision or public facilities improvement agreement that's in place, that's negotiated, that may require maybe no more or maybe more improvement requirements and what's given to the mitigation measures in the EIR, and that includes sewer, water, and drainage facilities, as well as dry utilities, cable and gas, as well as electric, and then also what associated agencies or utilities are associated with those, and what is the cost of getting that offsite infrastructure in place if there is offsite infrastructure needed. The permit timing, laying out, I would say, not only securing the local grading permits, but also securing any other support agency approvals, whether it's state or federal, um, needs to be understood and clarified when you're describing or presenting these properties. The and then just developing a contingency for the unknowns. Um, sometimes, especially in dealing with areas where there might have been streams, or in areas that may be inhabited by indigenous people, there's often artifacts that are found, and what's a contingency plan. So you want to get your team together and you want to brainstorm and play the what ifs. What's the worst case scenario that's not necessarily articulated in the mitigation measures or in the subdivision improvement plans, but from experience, there might be certain issues that you may have to deal with, and be able to have a contingency plan for those. So next, part of this is how communities should learn how to anticipate and remove obstacles, um, such as environmental constraints, infrastructure gaps, as well as permitting delays and unclear documentation. So, recognizing these common barriers that slow down site development and how to address them proactively. Again, the first stop, at least that I do, is go to the mitigation measures and plan extensively prior to implementation. Um, this is really important to truly understand, clarify each of the mitigation measures. And if you don't believe the environmental document actually is clear, then you need to sit down with the agency that suggested it, and make sure you clarify it. Those each of those measures. Also, um, you need to understand each of the infrastructure elements, and the infrastructure elements, whether it's offsite or onsite, whether it's roadway, sewer, water, drainage, wet utilities or dry utilities, or any special improvement such as high voltage um, installation that require assistance from utilities or other agencies. Uh, that's really important to identify those early. Um, you don't want to be at a point where you have secured your grading permit, your middle of grading, and all of a sudden, as your improvement plans are being processed, you suddenly have to deal with another agency outside of the city or the county to secure a permit or permission, or an easement to complete an improvement plan sign off, or watershed, um, to secure a building permit. So you want to have in check, identify all the elements for grading permit, for improvement plans, for building construction drawings upfront. You can't wait while you're in the middle of the lake and figure out how to swim back. That's a very dangerous and a very expensive and sometimes prolonged process that 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 sometimes you see individuals, developers decide to take a risk, but didn't quite analyze the totality of their decisions. Also, um, double check the title report. That's really critical on any property. The title report will uh, tell you all the encumbrances on that property, including special agreements with agencies, easements, easement rights, any other special rights or encumbrances that prohibit or alter or limit the type of development that can go on the property. So it's not just zoning, it's not just um, uh, the jurisdictional approvals, but the title report may have some elements that you need to consider or remove prior to pulling any type of construction permit. So the next item um, is to clearly understand um, the criteria used by private sector decision makers on how to align local practices with those expectations. In other words, how to understand what developers and site selectors look for when determining if a site is construction ready. And we talked about a lot of those um, items in the early part of this presentation. And I must say, the most abused phrase that I have heard over my whole career is the term shovel ready. Shovel ready. There's over 200 people on this webinar today, and if we passed a paper out to every single one of you to ask about your definition of shovel ready, I bet you we would have at least 50 different definitions. Um, I like the term construction ready. I think, and I believe Jolie used another term that I'm impressed with, and that's business ready. And business ready has a very broad connotation of beyond just delivering a site, beyond just delivering an occupancy permit, but business ready, I think, goes into incentives, taxes, sales tax, all the elements that affect operational aspects besides just a capital expenditure. So I think I like the term business ready, and I may be using that going into the future. So that's great. Thank you, Jolie. Um, so the uh, the key part of this is really having a line of sight to a building permit and being able to go through the elements we spoke about. Again, this is a several hour, multi-day potentially discussion about all these elements. So this is a crash discussion, summary discussion. So I encourage you to be thinking about questions of specifics that you may want to ask at the end of this webinar discussion, and I'll be glad to answer to the best I can. But another aspect of it is a site inspection ready? A lot of people don't think about that, but the jurisdictions need to be able to be ready for inspections. And there may be some special inspection requirements, such as 24/7 inspection to coincide with a 24/7 um, construction schedule, or extended hour inspection. It's hard to take a project with extended hours unless there is a jurisdictional inspector that's ready to look at the project as it's being built out and sign off on certain sites, certain elements when those elements are ready on site to be inspected and signed off. And that might be at 6:30 at night during the summer, or it might be with extended hours, or it might be at 2 a.m. with 24/7. So it's important that the construction schedule intent and the inspection protocol is matching. Um, Also, you know, does the project clear all the implementation hurdles? We talked about implementation hurdles earlier in the presentation, but all those hurdles, whether it's held by the local permitting agency or other agencies, and identifying those hurdles early is critical. And of course, you know, again, I can't emphasize even more to spell out all the steps to secure a grading permit, improvement plans, um, improvement plan approvals, uh, building construction plan approvals, inspection protocols, and then how the public facilities are accepted. Because without those acceptance of those public facilities, to some degree, and probably in most agencies to the ultimate degree, the occupancy permit and how that occupancy permit is issued is really critical to articulate. And so, getting a clear understanding of the criteria used, within the private sector, but it's really transparency, clarity, and and being able to identify early the steps necessary to ultimately occupy a building. So, our next area I think is probably the most important aspect of the whole process of presenting a clarified, a very succinct and trustworthy um, message about any potential prospect property to a user, to another agency that's interested, or to a developer entity that wants to invest in that particular property. And this has to deal with the community should understand how the internal coordination improves a site's readiness and reduces delay and makes their site more competitive for investment. And this is really strengthening the collaboration between the economic development teams, the planning departments, the engineers, public works, and partnering agencies to be aligned as to the mission of the project, the being able to understand whatever is the lead agency needs to articulate, the mission, the purpose, the vision of a project, and being able to have, literally a collaborative partnership of aligned interests in order to get the message and a credible message across to any party that's interested in a particular property. So, the development of a project is a collaborative project. It's a team effort. It doesn't reside with one individual. It doesn't reside with one particular department or in many cases one particular agencies. It's a collaboration of a whole symphony of participants that really have to ultimately be able to play off of one sheet of music. And alignment at all levels is really needed. Um, an important part of our efforts, in this realm, is to create an end-to-end Gantt chart and of the whole process, whether the process is 10 steps or 1,000 steps. Um, it's really important for a user to see the end-to-end, um, from where the status of the project is today and all the steps you need to take to ultimately end up in occupancy and securing that final occupancy permit. And again, we with these projects and articulating, especially to users, employers, other agencies that are interested in investing, in a particular property, um, we need to send a very credible, complete, and clean message to articulate these properties that are critical to the economic development of the community, of the city, of the counties, of our state, in order to effectively, garner trust. It's really developing trust in the information, trust in the process, and trust in the deliverers of the information. So with that, I've went through each of the 6 points that I said that we would do today, and I would like to open up the last 10, 15 minutes of this portion of the webinar to questions and answers.
Jerry, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and providing such an in-depth presentation. And thank you for expanding our minds on the use of the term shovel ready. I will definitely keep construction ready and if a site is inspection ready in mind when I'm talking about our business ready sites program. So thank you so much for that. And with that, we'd love to open it up for questions from our audience. Um, if you would like to ask Jerry a question, you can either raise your hand and we will unmute you, or you can add your question to the Q&A. So if you have questions, please at this time, we'd love to hear from you. Dora, do we see any hands raised at this time?
Not yet. It's I think everybody got a lot out of that. Folks, if you would like to ask a question and prefer to come off mute, please raise your hand or type it in the Q&A and I can help out with that.
I'm sure someone must have a burning question about a site.
Not seeing any at the moment, but Julia, there was that question about the specific site, I think that Mr. Kamilos was referring to. I think there was interest to know more about the sites that you were talking about, and maybe we can follow up after the webinar as well.
Yeah, Jerry, are there any specific sites that you were referring to during the presentation that you'd like to talk more about?
Actually, it was just more in general. It's having a lot of participants from a whole variety of jurisdictions across the state. Those are as I said, it's a very summary discussion. Normally, each of those elements that I talked about, probably, you could probably break it down to, 200 different elements. Probably each take about, anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours to discuss. So, I think the if you want to hear, some experience, on certain properties. For example, we worked on a property that a prior developer missed an understanding of the soil conditions, and it actually ended up pouring foundation on the property, and the rains came, and there was a chalk material that became unstable underneath the foundation, and so the soil engineer didn't catch it. They assumed that the soil condition was similar to what other neighboring properties, but this had a special condition. And so part of that process is, instead of assuming a broad assumption on soil conditions, when we develop a parcel, we always do a separate parcel by parcel test on each of them. And so those are some of the caution that you need to take in order to assess the site.
Yeah, it's so important not to miss steps. We know that that can cost tons of dollars. And I'm sure that um, that was not a pleasant experience for them. So thank you for that example. Um, Ms. Pamela White mentioned, thank you for this helpful seminar. And so just wanted to mention that to you, Jerry. Any other questions? Well, if there are no other questions, we still have, about 10 to 15 minutes. So any questions? We have a little bit of time for you all. Well, if there are no further questions, we can close out the Q&A, and then you're always welcome to follow up with the Business Ready Sites team uh, and ask us any questions that you may have. Just to share some of the support and resources that we have available. We provide one-on-one technical assistance. We have our regional data tool that is available at no cost. We have our Business Ready Sites program guide and account registration guide available to you to be able to help you through account registration. We have our site submission checklist for once you um, have registered and are ready to submit your site. You can use our site submission checklist as a guide to follow along, ensuring that you have added all the necessary information during the submission process. We have an FAQ available. We will be hosting an office hours uh, and continuing with that, just so that folks can pop on if there are any questions. And then we have our webinar series recordings that are available on our YouTube channel. And so you can go back and watch any of those recordings. And this specific webinar is also being recorded. So if you came on late, just know that you can go back and watch this one as well. So if there are any questions for the Business Ready Sites team, you can contact us at businessreadysites@gobiz.ca.gov. If there are questions for the CalBiz team, they can be reached at calbiz@gobiz.ca.gov. And then for any general GoBiz questions, you can scan our QR code there and send them on, and we'll make sure they get to the right place. So those questions we ask that you allow 48 hours for a response, but we are happy to answer your questions and get back to you. So with that, we thank you so much again for joining us. Thank you so much, Jerry. And we appreciate your time today. And we hope that you all enjoy the rest of your afternoon. So thank you and take care.
Thank you.
Julia, it looks like there's a couple questions that got submitted.
Oh, are they? Okay, sure thing.
How do we get added to the webinar series? My manager has sent me this information, but I would love to get the invite direct to me. Jennifer,
Oh,
I said.
okay, of course, Jennifer, we can go ahead and send it to you. At this point, we may only have one more webinar in the series, but we will share that information with you when it is available.
And she has her email. And then there's anonymous. Is there a limit on the number of sites that we can submit as a county?
So there is technically there is no limit. However, what we're looking for is about 2 to 4 sites per region. And again, we're looking for the top cream of the crop sites within uh, the county or region. So please keep that in mind when you are submitting your sites. Let's see. Oh, that was from Jennifer. I'm part of the Merced Ag Tech Alliance. Okay. Let's see. Was there one more? Oh, thank you, Jennifer. Appreciate it. We will
That
connect with you soon. Any other questions? Any hands that I may have missed?
Yeah, if somebody just wants to ask the question again, happy to take you off mute too, if you want to raise your hand. Thank you, Gary. Jerry, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
That was a
It's
wonderful
okay.
presentation. Appreciate your time so much.
My pleasure, Julie and Julie. So, thank you.
Very challenging topic to lots of nuances to it.
All right. Well, if there are no other questions, again, thank you all for joining. We will hopefully have the recording out sometime this week, and we appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you next time. All right. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.